be back.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Future Strong. I am Lindsay Pollock, and I am joined, as always, by my wonderful colleague, Nicky Garcea. Nicky.
Thank you, Lindsay. I was pausing for a moment, saying how excited I was that we were back on, and we were actually back on. So welcome, everybody, to episode 42. As you can tell, we had a slight break over the summer, so we're really looking forward to getting on with this episode and introducing you all to Matt. But before we do, a couple of intros and announcements. So my name's Nicky Garcea, for those of you who have never watched Future Strong, and I'm the co-founder of Capfinity. Capfinity is a skills and strengths-based organisation, and we provide skills and strengths assessments to specifically support Generation Z. And we work with organisations and universities to help identify and unleash Gen Z's potential. So that is some of the reasons why I originally met the wonderful Lindsay Pollock, who is co-host of Future Strong, but now a firm friend, and who I will get to see on Sunday. So I'm very excited to be back together in person. But Lindsay, tell everyone about yourself and also a little bit about what you've been doing over the summer.
Thank you, Nicky, and welcome, everybody. Please introduce yourselves in the chat and let us know where you are watching from. We're so glad that you are back with us. I'm Lindsay Pollock. I'm a career and workplace author and speaker, author of 4 books. My latest is Recalculating, Navigate Your Career Through the Changing World of Work. This summer, back to in-person speaking, lots and lots of live events, which made me so happy. And thanks to all the clients out there who are watching. I had the pleasure of speaking at the PeopleGrove Innovators Conference, which Matt is going to tell us a little bit about in a moment. And I also just this week launched my second LinkedIn learning course, Managing a Multi-Generational Team. And if you go to my LinkedIn profile, that is unlocked for 24 hours from when you click on it. So you can watch that for free and check it out. But I'm just so glad to be back. Really looking forward to a great conversation today and a really productive fall.
Amazing, Lindsay. And Matt and I are big fans of that course, so urge everybody to get into it and take a look. I just wanted to, before we hand to Matt, this was obviously not the episode we thought we were going to launch with. We thought we were going to go live with Brian Quick and Abbott, and we cancelled the episode at short notice 2 weeks ago because of the passing of Queen Elizabeth. And really, I guess, the global outpouring of grief for an incredible role model. And so from a strengths perspective, we just wanted to acknowledge her passing, thank everybody who sent lovely notes, completely agreed with the cancellation of the episode. We are rescheduling Brian and Fiona for October 21st. But also just to say, from a role model perspective, incredible strengths of humility and diplomacy, and particularly, I think, for working women, an amazing amount of work ethic, which has been spoken about and acknowledged, but I think Lindsay and I feel has been very inspirational. So we couldn't start this episode without acknowledging the cancelling of the last and also her passing. But without further ado, Lindsay is going to let Matt finally speak and really get into this episode, which we're really looking forward to. So Lindsay, over to you and Matt.
Thank you. Couldn't be happier to introduce Matt. But I'm going to hold off for just one more minute to welcome some of our guests so Matt knows who is in the audience listening. We've got some of our Capfinity colleagues. Trudy, Will, and Molly are all working today from Baltimore, from Charm City. We've got our good friend Mike Summers from Lafayette College. We've got Dale McLennan from Endicott College in Beverly, Massachusetts. My friend Christian Hines from New York City, Evercore, and our friend LaToya Hodge from Florida. But today, our very special guest is another very good friend and colleague who has a really interesting career path on both the higher education side and now at a technology company. But I will let him introduce himself. Matt Kelly, welcome to Future Strong.
Thanks, Lindsay, and thank you, Nicky. I'm really excited to be here, so really appreciate the invitation. Good morning, everyone from San Francisco. Hopefully you're having a wonderful Friday. My name is Matt Kelly. I'm the Director of Strategic Marketing and Communications at PeopleGrove. And if you're not familiar with PeopleGrove, we work with colleges and universities to provide a career access platform for students and alumni. What that means for us and what that means to us is that we bring career exploration job connections, but most importantly, social capital structures to students and alumni so that they can best effectively leverage the community that you have at your institution. And so much of my work revolves around the reading and research and writing around social capital. Was fortunate enough to speak at NACE this summer, hosted the conference in San Francisco, which we'll talk about in a minute. And I've been doing some really interesting research with some of our partner institutions on the impact of social capital. So excited to share more about that today.
Thanks, Matt. We've got your colleague, Vanessa Bush, watching. Welcome, Vanessa. And Kathy Butler is here with us as well. Everybody, please say hello in the chat. We've also got Margie Whiteleather from Western New York. Matt, so now that we know a little bit about PeopleGrove, tell us about your path to this organization. How did you come to this role?
Yeah, it's fairly winding, like many career paths. I graduated from Georgetown University in 2008 with a history and theology degree. And if you remember what was happening in 2008, it was the recession. And I will never, ever speak ill of my liberal arts degree. I think my liberal arts degree has provided me such wonderful opportunity, such amazing perspective on career and work and life. However, it was tough to get a job with holding that degree in 2008. Most of my roommates and classmates were business school students and had the pretty structured in between junior and senior year internship that turned into their offer right during senior year and pretty much coasted until graduation. And meanwhile, I was kind of struggling to figure out really what I wanted to do. And also suddenly realizing as a graduating student, a senior in college, that I didn't take advantage of the opportunities that I had available to me through my community at Georgetown. But I was fortunate enough to get a job as a middle school teacher in Los Angeles, where I first started my career. And I loved history. I knew the subject matter forward and backward, but I had absolutely no clue how to deliver content to the scariest audience that exists, which is 30, 11-year-olds. And so I found myself a mentor, and I attached myself to someone in my school who was a 35-year veteran of LA public schools. And just, you could find me attached to the hip. And she looked at my lessons, she looked at my material, she sat in on my classes. And really, she was kind of my first real traditional mentor in the sense of the word. Meanwhile, in LA, I was trying to find a little bit of my path. Fun fact, I don't think Lindsay even knows this, but I worked in Hollywood for a couple summers doing film stuff, working for a director, which was super exciting and fun. But decided to go back to alma mater, went back to Georgetown and worked in alumni career services. And my responsibility was primarily to create these structures for students and alumni to connect and start to build some of these networking programs and networking platforms that could really help drive that type of career outcomes that we're looking for students. And frankly, from the alumni side of the house, keep alumni engaged in volunteering and keep alma mater front of mind and keep us relevant in their lives. And so I actually worked with PeopleGrove when I was at Georgetown to launch a platform there that we called Hoya Gateway, and got my MBA at night as well. When I finished that degree, I had a conversation with the two co-founders at PeopleGrove, Riley Davis and Adam Saven, and said, I love this work. I think this is interesting. I had mentorship experiences, not just with my mentor teacher in Los Angeles, but also with my peers in my MBA program. I never took a business class before my MBA, so really relied on them to help me get through it and saw the power of peer-to-peer connections and that type of social capital, and thought I really wanted to kind of grow my own impact, not just at Georgetown, but across multiple different institutions. And so took a role with PeopleGrove, and really excited. I've been there for almost 4 years in December. And it's been a wonderful ride, and learning about all the different institutions, and can always rely on Mike Summers for anything and everything when you call. So much appreciated to Mike. But learning about everyone's different way of building alumni affinity and building alumni connections and building social capital for learners, and not just learners who are students. When I say learners, I'm talking about alumni too, who are looking to navigate their own post-graduation career path. I heard a wonderful phrase this week from Notre Dame that they call it the 4 and the 40. There's the 4 years you're on campus, but there's the 40 years you're off campus where you're going to need that career support too. So a wonderful approach and perspective on the work that our institutions do.
Matt, thank you for giving us such a detailed overview of your career path, and I can really get a sense of how that has supported you to the work that you do at PeopleGrove. I have got a question regarding PeopleGrove, but just for those listening, will you say a little bit about, you've mentioned social capital a few times, and would you just give your understanding of that before we go on? Because I think it'd be helpful to the listeners.
Yeah, I think my favorite definition of social capital comes from a French sociologist from 1983. And it's really about, I'm not going to quote the whole definition, but the two things that really, Pierre Bourdieu is the name of this sociologist, if you wanted to Google him. But the two elements of social capital that I think are really important are, first, it is the access piece of it. So it is really the fact that you have access to resources just simply by mutual acquaintance, by the fact that you're a member of a community, by the fact that you happen to attend an institution. And it's really about the people that you can kind of surround yourself with. So by virtue of the fact that you have simple mutual acquaintance or membership in a community, there are resources available to you. The other piece of it, of his definition that I love, is he says real or potential. So much of the things that I think, much of the issues we see with social capital in higher education today is that so much of it is still potential. There's not enough structure to turn that potential into real or actual resources that are exchanged through these relationships. And it could be as intense as a mentor teacher like Mrs. Backus, who, my teacher in LA, who I attach myself to the hip to, or as casual as a 15-minute conversation where someone opens up their network to you. So the real Julia Freeland Fisher, who's the director of education at the Christensen Institute, would say access, the ability to mobilize, and then the exchange of resources through relationships is how you can look at social capital and think, well, is this effective, and is this working, and is this something that we can continue to invest in?
Thank you. I feel really well informed now, so I'm sure everyone else does, and it makes a lot of sense.
I'm an academic at heart, so I'll quote people.
I can tell that. I mean, we now need to make the episode an hour long, but it's brilliant.
Yeah.
So would you just share with us, from your perspective, the state of networking and mentoring and maybe social capital for higher education since the pandemic? It'd be great just to get your view of that.
Yeah, I think like most things in the world, perhaps, but definitely within higher education, the pandemic really accelerated a lot of changes that were already happening. So the number one way that people get a job is through networks. We know that. But social capital hadn't been leveraged in a really effective and strategic way in higher ed for a very long time. And I think over the last 10 to 15 years, that was starting to change. I think with the advancements in technology in that time, the realization that students weren't always going to be on campus, right? I think more non-traditional college-going students were now enrolling in higher education programs. So we're not talking about the 18 to 22-year-old who's on campus for 4 years. We're talking about working professionals. We're talking about remote learning. And they were starting to make up the majority of students that were enrolling in higher education programs. Then when the pandemic hit, of course, it went all virtual, went all online. And schools who didn't have a technology-based program or anything like that kind of expanded access to social capital outside of the campus really saw the need to strategically implement something or put something into play that provided that access, that ability to mobilize, and then made sure that the resources were flowing in the relationships. I think for a long time, we relied solely on the organic nature of a campus to create relationships, right? Even in programs that I managed at Georgetown, two of the big ones that we did were 2 different networking events where we brought 100 or so alumni onto campus and advertised it to students and took registrations. And, that it took about, 40 to 50% of the workload for the year were these 2 major events. And yet the scale of it was 100, 150, 200 max, maybe. Whereas now there's a real recognition post-COVID that you have to really create a structure and a plan around social capital in the digital world, social capital in technology. And so that's been the major shift since COVID. I wouldn't even call it a shift, perhaps. I'd just call it an acceleration of some of the trends that we were seeing before the pandemic.
So that was a huge theme of your fantastic conference this summer, the Innovators Conference hosted by PeopleGrove. Some of the people in the audience were there. I know Mike Summers and obviously Vanessa. Also want to welcome our colleague, Mary Scott, who has joined us. You know, Mary is out there in the audience. Be careful with your data. Not meaning be careful, she'll steal your data, but she will know the numbers of your data. So Matt, it was a fantastic conference. I had the opportunity, the honor of being there. It was in the absolutely most beautiful venue I think I've ever attended a conference in the Presidio in San Francisco. But from your perspective as someone who curated all of the content and really heard all the conversations and the feedback, what were the hottest topics at the conference? What came up? What did people from alumni, career services, and higher ed want to talk about? You know, what would you say were maybe 2 or 3 of the top issues that were addressed at that event? It's such a pivotal moment, I think, of where we are in the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I was excited to have these conversations at our conference in August because, Lindsay, I think you and I were part of some of these conversations in June in Portland, and Nicky as well. But career education and career experiences and career connection being at the center of a new higher education model was a big thing that I think I heard at Innovators in August. We heard from a lot of different institutions who said that suddenly social capital and networking and mentoring had become an institutional priority. And for the first time, they were hearing from their president that they needed a plan for this. And so which was great because for so long it had been a kind of a bottom-up fight, right? Those who were on the ground and those who were, working in alumni career service programs like myself were arguing for the validity and for the impact and importance of these types of programs. And then to have the president come to you and say, hey, I think we need this. I'm like, oh, good. I've already got it baked and ready. Drew University is a great example. They're doing a wonderful new center that was founded on campus that is just centered on mentoring and connections and networking. And it's really about making those career connections. So that was the first thing. Second thing is that diversity, equity, and inclusion, it needs to be involved in every conversation in higher education going forward. You have to make sure that those who come from traditionally underserved backgrounds are being served in a way that meets their needs. And they have very different, sometimes specific needs coming from first generation backgrounds, students of color, LGBTQ students, students who might need to find folks who look like them or have the same orientation as them on campus is an important aspect of how we can really help them build social capital. And especially for first generation students, help them catch up to the level of their peers. They're statistically likely to join your institution with half the social capital, the inherited network of their multi-generational peers. And the third thing is faculty involvement. I think this is a really big thing that I've heard from folks like Mike, in fact, is that getting faculty involved in making sure that career discussions and career engagement is a part of the classroom experience, and they're not so separated. I think that integration is going to be really important going forward.
This is brilliant, Matt, in terms of those themes. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, and you mentioned this before we went live, you actually offered my husband this book, so I'll make sure he can, get hold of a copy. And he does need it, and people will know when I mention the title. So your CEO, Adam Seven, has written this book, Super Mentor, and clearly huge growth area. Could you just share some of the themes from the book and some of the things that I guess have, and here we go, here's the link to it. What are some of the reasons of why this book's come into existence?
Yeah, I think so. Adam and Eric Koster, who is a professor at Georgetown, paired together to kind of create this framework of what modern mentorship can look like in the digital age. And I think the first theme of it is that we just have to recognize that people who engage in networking or mentorship, they want something. And it's not just a relationship. It's not just like a friend or someone to talk to. It's an opportunity. And it's okay to recognize that. It's okay that that's the case. But the way that they get there is through this framework that we call it aim high, ask small, do it again. So you can plan out and really think about who you're going to network with and who's the ultimate person you'd like to reach out with. So when I was working on film sets back in my Los Angeles days, Bob Iger was the person I always wanted to talk to, CEO at Disney, right? But how does someone who's working as essentially a production assistant, with an earpiece in, getting Jake Gyllenhaal coffee, going to have a conversation with Bob Iger, right? That's the farthest probably path that exists in Hollywood.
Well, now I just want to ask you about Jake Gyllenhaal. So,
we'll have
Lindsay, stick with the program. Come on,
Yeah.
sorry. I could see you. Your eyes were very excited.
Nice guy, very nice guy. But so if I aim high right now, so I need to make a plan for how to get to Bob Iger. And there are definitely ways to do that. I can look at different connections that we might share. I can look across different organizations that I'm a part of or can connect with. But as I go through that process, I'm going to have dozens of conversations along the way to my one ultimate conversation. And during those conversations, you ask small. There's small asks that you kind of create. And we, in the book, provide kind of a method for creating those small asks via a project. If I'm hosting a podcast or a LinkedIn live show, it's easy for me to reach out to someone and say, can I ask your advice on this project I'm working on? Or I'm writing a book. Can I interview you for my book? It's not necessarily a direct ask for an opportunity, but that small ask kind of creates the relationship that leads to the opportunity down the road. And you do it again. You find new people, you keep going on the process. You recognize that most people are nice. They're not going to just outright say no and tell you off. 50% might not get back to you, but that other 50% are going to be ones that can help you get that on that path to that ultimate conversation that you're looking for. And the book provides a lot of different we kind of built this framework around Eric's study of 142 different high profile mentorships. Think like Maya Angelou and Oprah Winfrey, or even Bradley Cooper, Todd Phillips, to go with the Hollywood theme. And then the data that we've seen on the PeopleGrove side that kind of can influence that and kind of support some of the things and frameworks that we're coming up with looking at those high profile mentorships. So really encourage you to pick it up. It's on sale. We launched this week. So ebooks are only 99 cents. That's the only plug I'll have for the entire LinkedIn live show, but definitely check that out.
That's great. We absolutely will. I think that's so smart because mentoring and networking can be these huge, complicated, intimidating seeming topics, particularly, as you said, for people from underrepresented backgrounds who might feel that they don't have the social capital. And you've actually studied that. I want to pivot to another download and link that we have, which is PeopleGrove's Social Impact Report, which I know, Matt, you were very involved with and really passionate about that. Can you tell us about that work and some of the findings?
Yeah, so some of the data that I mentioned about super mentors was really part of this study that we did, looking at the outcomes of social capital that we see in our platform. So like many technology tools, we collect a lot of data on connections. We can look at number of messages, number of connections. We have kind of a 5-star rating that goes out, all qualitative. And we were actually interested in taking that one step further and saying, well, for those people who are making these connections or these people who are engaging on the platform, are they getting the outcomes that they're looking for? And in higher education, the outcomes that they're looking for is a career. They're looking for a good job. They're looking for career confidence. They're looking to be career ready. And so we asked. We did a survey last year between July and October, asking students and alumni in the PeopleGrove platform about their career confidence levels, looking at like those who have 5 or more connections and comparing them to those who had 4 connections or 3 connections, 2 connections, to kind of look at the impact that multiple connections, the do it again piece of super mentors, have on learners. We looked at the helpfulness of the alumni community. You may recall Gallup's report maybe a few years back that only 9% of alumni find their network to be helpful or very helpful nationally. And if you are at an elite institution, one of those top 25, it's only 16% find their network to be helpful or very helpful. So we asked about that in terms of the helpfulness and really came up with some very interesting data. I think that the piece that I was most excited about was around first generation students. Because as I mentioned, they're more likely to come to your institution with a smaller inherited network by virtue of the fact that their parents or guardians did not get a bachelor's degree. And to steal a joke from Julia Freeland Fisher, it's mostly in the knowledge economy, right? Doctors, lawyers, congresspeople. Whether or not you want to know a congressperson in 2022 is a different question. But it's mostly in that knowledge economy where students kind of get their degree and launch off into those types of careers. And so what we saw with our report was that if you can get a first generation student to start making connections and you get to kind of this threshold of 5, you see these wonderful results where the first generation students actually surpass their peers in the level of utility, I'll call it, that the network has. They're getting jobs and internships at a higher rate than their peers. They're growing in their career confidence at a higher rate than their peers. And actually, so which means to me is that they're either catching up to the level of inherited network that their peers started with when they joined the institution, or surpassing it, which was really exciting to see. And I think that was a big piece of the research that is really going to drive our work as we look towards what 2023, 2024, and 2025 look like for our company, and how we're building these structures for social capital that support students like that. So it was a really exciting research report. We're doing it again. We're doing it on an annual basis so we can have some year-over-year data and make sure we're comparing things. And I'm going on because this is my academic side coming out, Nikki. I apologize. So I'll stop here.
No, it's brilliant. And I urge people to look at the report. You were saying some things about first-gen students. And as a first-gen student, that piece of really having to activate a network that you don't have massively resonates with me. And I can see also Latoya, my colleague, who is an amazing mentor, is saying that aim high, ask small, and do it again is officially her new personal mantra. So that is praise indeed, because she does some absolutely amazing mentoring. I'm going to just ask a slightly off-piste question. I was at HR Tech last week in Las Vegas, first time in Vegas. Really quite something. People can smoke and play the slot machines at 8 o'clock in the morning whilst you're having a coffee. So, you know, as a Brit, it was a whole new world to me. Colleagues, I was not smoking and on the slot machine. I was just walking through the casino. But at HR Tech, the keynote was Josh Bersin, and he was illustrating that within really the technology sphere globally, it's a bit like a kitchen drawer with loads of utensils in it. Yep. And everyone's got this messy kitchen drawer. And he was empathizing with how hard it was to know how to pick a vendor in this space. Mm-hmm. And thinking back to your time when you were on the side of actually choosing who you were going to bring in, and within a higher education institute, which I do think is sometimes harder to then bring in external vendors. What are some of the things that people in higher education are going through when they want to acquire technology like PeopleGrove, and any kind of hints and tips you can give to make that easier for people?
Yeah, I think, well, certainly the buying process in higher education is definitely slower than I would in most industries. We definitely work at a pace where multiple stakeholders are always important to involve and engage when you are kind of purchasing a technology product. You know, when I was purchasing PeopleGrove out of the Alumni Association at Georgetown, right? The purchase wasn't just going to affect alumni, we were going to impact students, which means I needed to get the buy-in of the Career Center, work with the scholarship program to make sure that we had open access for their students, work with different academic departments. There were 4 undergraduate colleges at Georgetown when I was there. So I had to make the rounds and go to the nursing school and School of Foreign Service and the business school and the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences and do the whole presentation, right? So I think that was the pre-COVID days. In the post-COVID days, I think it's become a little bit simpler in terms of gathering those stakeholders just by virtue of technology. But I also think that the thing that I've seen, the trend in those buying processes over time, have been more about thought leadership that's coming out of companies. You know, the kitchen drawer is great, and, you know, technology can do a lot of different things. And, you know, there are different things that differentiate that technology from others. And so paying attention to those are important, but also paying attention to the mission, the vision, what the company is publishing, how they think about the problem, how they present and propose their solution to the problem. It's always been something that I'm passionate about, given the work that I do in the reading, research, and writing. But also, I think it makes a big difference in an academic setting, especially. Now, for other companies out there, or you know, those who are working maybe on corporate mentorship programs, I think it's also very important about how they think about outcomes when it comes to mentorship, right? Career confidence and readiness and alumni helpfulness and those types of metrics that we report on are very higher ed specific. But there are other outcomes if you're running a corporate mentorship program that are important, right? Like, how are your mentees advancing in their career within your organization? Are mentees from your programs boomeranging back to your organization? I think that's a really interesting post-COVID development, is the boomerang employee. It's has its pros and cons, but at the same time, a mentorship program in those environments fosters attachment and affinity for not just higher ed, but also for your company, right? I think the McKinseys and the Bains and the Deloittes of the world do this wonderfully, and that's why they have boomerang employees constantly. And so thinking about those outcomes and how is the company that you're trying to purchase a technology from describing and discussing those outcomes is really the important thing that I would look for.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Matt. We are almost at time, so I'm going to ask Lindsay to summarize and give us the 3 takeaways. I've seen you busily writing, so I am eagerly awaiting the themes from this great episode.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Matt Kelly of PeopleGrove, for sharing so much academic thinking on the topic of social capital. I had 3 key takeaways. First of all, I have to say, after this show, I'm going to speak to a very intimidating group of lawyers, but now I'm really happy they're not 11-year-olds. So thank you for giving me a little confidence in my
11-year-olds are scary. They are scary.
I have one at home, and I can't imagine 30 of them. So thank you for that. My biggest takeaway, of course, is that Jake Gyllenhaal is, as he seems to be, a nice guy. But from our actual session today, Matt Kelly of PeopleGrove has shared with us 3 really important takeaways. Number 1 is that social capital, networking, mentoring are really becoming priorities of university presidents. And this is the moment, if you work in career services, if you work in alumni affairs, alumni career services, this is the moment to grab that seat at the table and really know that it is an institutional priority. I thought that was really inspiring. Number 2, a great phrase that resonated with so many in our audience, that modern mentorship, as from your new book, Super Mentors by Adam Saven, and his co-author, is to aim high, ask small, do it again. Aim high, ask small, do it again. And I think that is so valuable. And third takeaway, I know Nikki in particular is so passionate as a first-generation college student, as are so many of our listeners, that your social capital impact report research found that just 5 connections, just 5, can really make the difference for somebody who doesn't have a lot of social capital to meeting or even exceeding the capital of people from more privileged backgrounds. So thank you, Matt Kelly of PeopleGrove, for all of those really inspiring and timely takeaways.
Well, thank you both. I really appreciate the chance to be here and connect again with Nikki. I don't think we've seen each other since June, and really appreciate Lindsay joining us at Innovators to share her wonderful work. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for everyone listening to episode 42. We look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time, and we wish you great Fridays, good weekends, and we'll see you very soon. Thank you.